Well, folks, in today's video, we visit Trains and Such, located in Calgary, Alberta. Now, this was a train store which I had wanted to visit for quite a while now, and I was very fortunate because this summer me and my friend were taking a road trip across Canada, and at one point along the journey, we were very close to the train store, so we were able to pop in and pay them a visit, and boy oh boy was it ever worth it, because this place was absolutely wild. I really was not expecting to see a train store quite this big. They just had absolutely everything here. They had every scale from Z to G, tons of locomotives, tons of rolling stock, tons of buildings, tons of scenery. You name it, they probably had it here. It's certainly one of the best train stores I think I've ever visited. So anyway, I'm going to bring you all on a tour around the store. I'll show you the store in general, then some of the stuff I saw in detail. And at the very end, I'll share with you all the things I decided to get here. Anyway, let's begin the tour with this lot of what I believe are G-scale locomotives. I find G-scale is really just one of those scales you don't see at train stores too often, so it's nice to see a little bit here. I believe this shelf right here is mostly O-scale rolling stock, although I might be mistaken of that. I'm not 100% sure. I think this kind of old-timey steam locomotive at the bottom here, though, is a G-scale engine. I don't know. What do all of you think? Anyway, up here they had some O-scale locomotives, a whole bunch of different paint schemes, as you can see. This section right here was kind of just general stuff for HO layouts, just track and controllers. They had a whole bunch of used controllers. A lot of them were MRC, but you also had a few just kind of generic Bachmann train set controllers and some various other brands mixed in there. Here was one of their N-scale locomotive display cases, and I've got to say I was really impressed by their selection of N-scale diesels. Beside that, they also had a unfinished N-scale layout with what I believe is a Canadian Pacific AC 4400 roaming around it. I also liked seeing this little freight yard at the bottom. It seems like a nice touch to this layout. Below that, they had a whole bunch of N-scale rolling stock. Some of this stuff I think is used, I'm not entirely sure, but in any case, I was impressed by the selection of it. As you can see, they have quite a few different paint schemes. They also had some used locomotives. These ones I think were all being sold in as-is condition, so I don't know if they run or not, but the prices on them seemed pretty reasonable. Some of them were going for as low as $10, so I kind of couldn't resist the bargain, and I did actually end up buying a few of these. You can see right here they've got, I think that's a Bachmann one of some kind. I have no idea what this is. That's kind of unusual. I got a Santa Fe B unit. I got this locomotive, which I'm not so sure about. I think this one is supposed to be in non-running condition. And they also had a maybe an E7 or something in the Santa Fe paint scheme. A steam locomotive of some sort. And this little 040 from Bachmann. They also had this Canadiana set, as well as another display case with some pretty high-end N-scale engines on the inside. Here's the store's main HO scale layout. It's a pretty simple layout. I mean, it all looks good, but one thing I really did like to see was that they had a Tim Hortons on it. What a nice touch. Any Canadian will smile if they see that on a layout. Now this section right here is really special because this is where the store keeps all of its high-end HO scale locomotives. So you can see they have a whole bunch of different diesels, some Rapido RDCs, and a massive lot of high-end steam locomotives. I really was not expecting to see all of these. Some of these engines are made out of brass. I suspect a bunch of them are handcrafted or are from a high-end manufacturer. Many of them are Canadian locomotives, but they did have some American locomotives, such as the two Union Pacific Big Boys, but every single one of these locomotives was impressive just in terms of the amount of detail it had. I think the Big Boys are probably by Athearn, but I could be mistaken on that. I'm not entirely sure. They looked great, though. And then beside that, they also had even more diesel locomotives in a whole bunch of different paint schemes. Some common ones, but also a few kind of unusual ones, like Rail Link. So it was really good to see all of that. Very impressive. I did mention that this store carried Z-Scale, and here it is. You can see they've got a couple of different train sets by Micro Trains, and then below that they had a whole bunch of different Z-Scale rolling stock, as well as a display case with more rolling stock and a whole bunch of different locomotives. I find that Z scale is just one of those scales which, very similar to G scale, you just don't find at stores very often, so it was certainly something nice to see. I really liked this IKEA shelf with a whole bunch of vintage 50s/60s era packaging. It really is amazing how far it's come since then. Now down here is one of my favorite parts of any train store, the consignment section, specifically HO scale locomotives, and did they ever have a lot of them here. I would say that like 90% of these were Canadian National F units, all from different manufacturers. I think everything here was basically being sold in non-working order, or if it did run, I suspect it was quite rough. But they were all being sold fairly cheap, so they would all make very good projects, especially for somebody who's maybe learning to repair trains for themselves. You know, you could buy one of these cheap and just work on it, and if you're lucky, get one going. So yeah, overall a very nice part of the store. And they did have some other paint schemes, but as I said, you can see right here, you know, the majority of them were Canadian National F units. Certainly no shortage of those anytime soon. You know, in retrospect, I really should have asked whether or not this sign had any actual railroad history to it. It had to have been out of a station or something like that, but they had a little library there with a whole bunch of railroading books, so it's kind of nice if you're into rail history. They've even got something for you. And this shelf right here was where they had all of their kind of higher-end used locomotives. I think everything here was in its original box. Some of this stuff, I believe, is new old stock as well, so yeah, pretty good stuff overall. And this isn't even all the locomotives that they had. Down here they had a whole bunch of rolling stock, but if you look carefully, there are actually some locomotives mixed in here. There was one locomotive which kind of caught my eye, this Model Power E7. I almost bought this thing, but they let me test it out, and it turned out somebody had actually taken the motor from it, which they just weren't aware of, so I ended up passing on that deal. It seems to be a really common thing, those Model Power engines not having motors in them. I don't know if they were just really prone to burning out, but it's not the first time I've encountered that. But in any case, they sure had a lot of tempting deals, and I did actually end up buying a couple locomotives out of this section. I really liked those Southern Pacific units. You know, there were just a lot of tempting deals. I kind of had to hold myself back because, you know, road tripping back, I had limited space, so I had to choose wisely what it was I wanted out of here. But I didn't leave empty-handed, that's for sure. I found this place really seemed like one of those places you could spend an entire day in if you weren't careful. You know, I was just kind of quickly going over all of these locomotives to see if there was anything particularly special, but just the amount of different ones they had. There were some engines in here I hadn't even actually seen before, so it was pretty special. A lot of this stuff is also Athearn Blue Box, which happens to be one of my preferred brands, since the Athearn Blue Box stuff, like, they're just absolute tanks, and you can find them pretty cheap, and I actually ended up buying a Athearn Blue Box locomotive from here, and, you know, they let me test the previous E7 locomotive, which didn't fire up because it was missing its motor, but when I brought the Blue Box over, put it on the track, and it fired right up. You know, a 60-year-old engine, and it didn't even hesitate, so yeah, very impressive stuff. I want to make it clear, you know, I was not in any way sponsored or compensated by the store, but I was overall very impressed by this shop. I mean, even their customer service was really nice. They were super friendly, which is really good to see, because I have been to some hobby shops in the past where customer service has not exactly been their strong suit, so it was really nice. And I was overall impressed with the store. I thought that they had a really good selection. I thought their prices were overall pretty good. You know, there were a couple things which were not as low as I'd like them to be, but on the other hand, they also had some stuff which I thought was below, you know, what I would consider an average value. So that's overall very good. So at the end of the day, I liked the store. Anyway, that's going to about wrap it up for the tour. At the end, I ended up going through these kind of junk bins of different HO scale rolling stock, but nothing in here really piqued my interest. But that's not to say I didn't buy anything, so let's have a look at that. Well, it's about 6 months later, and I'm obviously back home, and here is all the stuff I bought. I can't tell you how eager I've been to take all this stuff out and show all of you, but I wanted to get the video done before I did that, so it's been a long wait, but today I finally get to get all these engines out of the bag. Anyway, let's begin. So, first thing I bought was a whole bunch of cheap N-scale engines. So the first one was the Bachmann 040. I just couldn't resist. It looks like a good engine. It's all intact, and it was going for 10 bucks. So yeah, I bought that. And then I found this Burlington Northern locomotive. It's a Kato, and it was also only $10. I believe these engines don't run, but Kato engines are very tough. $10 for a Kato is very cheap in my opinion, even if it doesn't run. And I also bought the Norfolk and Western. Again, another $10 engine. It could make for a fun project. So there's something for the N-scale collection. Now, as for HO. I found this thing. This is the Athearn Blue Box, which I was able to test in the store. It was going for 20 bucks, which I thought was a pretty good deal. And it's kind of a cool locomotive. It's missing the handrails, but it does have its coupling boxes intact, so it wouldn't be hard to fix this engine up a little bit. And these things are just absolute tanks. So yeah, I really don't have any concerns about it being in poor condition. And then finally, the last thing I bought is something I really was not expecting to find, but it's pretty special. It's a Southern Pacific cab forward. I have wanted one of these for a really long time. This one's broken, it doesn't run, but it's a Rivarossi, and Rivarossi engines tend to be pretty tough in my opinion, so you know, I think we'll be able to get it running again. Time will tell, but it looks to have most of, if not all of its parts, which when I'm buying a broken engine, that's the most important part. If you have the parts, you can usually piece things back together and get them going again. And it was going for $75 Canadian, which in my opinion is not a bad deal, because if you wanted to buy one of these things on eBay, it'd probably run you $100 at least. So yeah, really happy with all of that. Anyway, I hope you all enjoyed my tour. I can't wait to get working on these different engines. I was overall very impressed with the store, and if I'm ever out that way again, I definitely go back in a heartbeat. But anyway, thank you all so much for watching.